Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Charmed Season 1, Episode 15. Is there a Woogie in the house? Episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of exactly what happens within this episode. After an earthquake hits the city and the aftershocks, the sisters notice a smell coming from the basement and hire a gas man in order to go into the basement to check out what they assume to be a gas leak. It turns out that in fact the Woogieman was released from where it was sealed beneath the basement of the house, and it first possesses the gas man before the gas man lures Phoebe, who then becomes possessed and temporarily turns evil until she eventually, with the help of her sisters, is able to fight off the evil and defeat the Woogieman using a spell that was hidden within a children's story told to all three of the sisters by Grams in their childhood when Phoebe had first encountered the Woogieman and seen Grams fighting it, and it left such a mark on her that she hadn't actually been to the basement for the last 18 years, afraid of this Woogieman. We then get Piper starting a little sub-romance for the series. I mean, we know Leo is endgame, but Piper meets Josh, who steals her wine and then later is a guest at the dinner party gifting her wine, which doesn't actually end up happening because they end up having to go to Quake because of all the issues with the house. And then later at the end of the episode, he gifts her with wine yet again, and their relationship has become more friendly than the awkward and adversarial relationship that started at the episode. And then Prue, of course, is attempting to host a dinner party in the house, which is why they call a gas man, because they want to make sure that they can use the stove. However, due to all of the issues with the house caused by the Woogieman, that dinner party ends up cut short. But that is also a little bit of a side plot to the episode as well. Either way, all's well that ends well, and the Woogieman ends up defeated by Phoebe, and they move on. Now that I've rewatched the episode, I'm then going to rank it on my two ranking lists. By now you should be familiar with them. It's the mostly objective ranking list, which is void emotion, and then the personal ranking list, which is entirely emotion-based and opinion-based. So on our mostly objective rank values, I'm happy to report that this episode did not have any negatives, or at least I didn't feel that it had any negatives to it, so we just have positive points. First, we have our multi-episode supporting character introduction with Josh, who, as mentioned in the summary, is a little minor love interest to Piper. We then get this supporting relationship development, which is Piper and Josh. In this episode, it essentially starts with Piper going to the wine store to get ingredients for Prue's dinner party that she's agreed to host and that Piper is cooking for. And of course, she sees the bottle on the shelf. She double checks her list, and while she's double checking the list, Josh kind of swipes it from behind her so that when she goes to grab it, it's gone, and then she sees that he's taken it. She goes over to him. She's like, I was just about to grab that. I need that for a recipe. And he basically says that he was told to get it as a gift by somebody whose family owns a vineyard and therefore it is the best, and so he's not going to give it to her. He buys the wine right out from under her, having already gone to two other wine stores, basically implying that this not white wine, I don't know if it's white or red, they never open the bottle, but anyways, that this wine is very important and hard to find, rare, a good vintage, a good brand, whatever the case may be. This, of course, makes Piper angry because she needed it for her dinner. Then, once the dinner party starts off, Josh comes into the kitchen to give the chef a gift, which is the wine she needed, and he immediately recognizes her, and it's kind of like an oh moment of, oops, my bad. Because he basically stole the chef's wine. But Piper at this point has been having some trouble with all of the appliances, covered in flour. He points out to her, trying to be nice, that she has some flour, and she freaks out and basically takes the wine but kicks him out of the kitchen, not really wanting anything to do with him at this point. However, later on, the guest who is the wealthy client of the auction house also happens to be a professor, and Josh is her professor's assistant. And so when she starts to commit evil because of the influence of the Woogie Man, the sisters then go to the campus to check on her, and once again he and Piper have a brief kind of flirtation, but she's still not really sold on him. And then he leaves to go check on the professor. They go in and play with the maps a bit. And then the next time that we see them interact within this episode is at the end of the episode. Once everything is settled, the sisters decide they need to check on the people who were influenced by the Woogie Man, make sure that they have been put back to normal. So Piper goes and speaks to Josh and asks how the professor is doing and what sort of consequences there were for her actions. And he lets her know that, while also once again gifting her the wine. And this time it's cute. And she also, when she arrives at the office, says she's wanting to check on him and then corrects herself to check on the professor. So again, showing that those feelings have gone from negative to positive. So this episode didn't have a lot of progression. It's more of the meet cute. And then in future episodes, we're going to see that progress more into the romantic side of things. But his introduction, as well as the supporting relationship development, is worth 2 points each, bringing us up to 4 points for the episode so far. And then we get some multi-season main character development, which is the fact that Phoebe was born within the house, and because she's born in the house, she has a stronger connection to the land, to the property, and to the spiritual nexus that exists at the house, meaning that she is more susceptible to evil and could potentially go either way more easily than Prue or Piper could, which I think is an interesting development that's brought up, and that's worth 4 points. And then there's the world building, which is the fact that the house is on the nexus, both a spiritual one due to its equidistance from each of the elements, which again are earth, fire, wood, water, and metal, but also on a Wiccan one, as it is in the center of a pentagram as well, which is of course a Wiccan symbol that was co-opted by Christianity. So in this case, it's not the evil pentagram, it is the Wiccan version of it. And there's also the fact that at the end of the episode, the sisters, for the first time, enter their own contribution into the Book of Shadows for future generations, under the worry that Graham's defeated the Woogie Man, and now the Woogie Man has come back, potentially for their children or grandchildren, it could come back again. And so now this time, instead of hiding the spell in a children's bedtime story, they have decided to add it to the book, and Phoebe is given the honor of that, as she was the one who paid enough attention to the story to have memorized the spell and remembered it in order to reseal the Woogie Man, which is another 4 points. And then finally is just in general, I felt that the plot concept for this episode was very strong. So strong, in fact, that they didn't really need subplots. Like, technically, the romance and the dinner party may be considered subplots, but they were both connected to the main plot in ways that usually we don't see with the subplots. A lot of the subplots in previous episode have kind of been just to show, like, interacting with other people and showing that they have lives with traumas and such. But in this case, it was everything was connected to that main plot of the Boogeyman was released. The dinner party was at the house, which was taken over by the Boogeyman, where the house was turning against them and therefore still considered to be probably part of that main plot, just kind of like a side of the main plot. And even like with Josh, he's a member of the dinner party crew that was coming over to eat at the house. He was impacted by the professor who was possessed by the Boogeyman to commit evil. So every side plot was really connected to that main plot because the main plot was so strong with this Boogeyman concept. And so for that, I am also giving it another 4 points. And with that, we have a 16 out of 10, 10 being the highest score that is possible for the ranking, and therefore it is technically a 10 out of 10 episode. Now, what happens when multiple episodes have the same score on the mostly objective ranking? Because emotion doesn't come into it, there's no way to really sort them against each other, and therefore we just put it in episode order. So as a reminder of our season 1 rankings so far, on our mostly objective ranking, we have Something Wicked This Way comes in first place. I've Got You Under My Skin, From Fear to Eternity. In fourth place is this episode, Is There a Woogie in the House? Fifth is Wicked Envy, Secrets and Guys, Dead Man Dating, Feats of Clay, Dream Sorcerer, The Witch is Back, Thank You for Not Morphing, The Truth is Out There and It Hurts, The Wendigo, The Wedding from Hell, and then in 15th we have The Fourth Sister. And now we're coming up to the personal ranking, which, as I had mentioned before, I felt that this episode was very strong with its plot concept. I personally think that this is one of, if not my favorite episode of this season of Charmed. I loved the spell as a child. It's one of the few spells that I actually fully was able to memorize as a child. I think it was because it was so rhymey. I also like that it is kind of like a little poem and that it would have fit really well within a children's story. And as when this first came out, I was a child, I very much connected to that concept, and that has held true all the way through to today, where it's still one of my favorite spells and probably the one that I have actually fully memorized and have never forgotten. So I felt like the spell resonated with me as a child, and now I like the way that Phoebe gets a new awesome power, her evil powers. Honestly, the sisters, when they turn evil, and it does happen every so often, usually only for like a moment in time and then they're back to being good. But on those rare occasions when they do turn evil, I often find that their powers get kind of a boost in a cool way. And in this case, Phoebe's power basically, she thinks of an object and poof, a little burst of black smoke, and there it is. And I remember as well, even now, thinking like if I could have a power that's shown in this show, what power would I want? Honestly, probably Pages because I mean I like the idea of quick travel, not big on driving, not big on public transportation. I feel like orbing would be the best power to have, bar none. But second to that is this one, the one with Phoebe, where she can just think of something and poof, there it is. I mean, you wouldn't even need to fast travel because if you need something, it's just poof, there it is. How amazing. I also like that kind of when the sisters are shown that they can't get into the house, they kind of come up against a barrier and Prue is thrown. Phoebe's inside the house and she says, "You don't live here anymore." And then she mimics Prue from the end of the first episode when she closes the door with her powers. Phoebe, now with her new powers, doesn't need her sisters and she mimics Prue's motion of closing the door, which I thought was really a nice detail to add, one of those small things. And it's also shown that when one of them does go bad, if they have truly gone evil, they will freeze. Like there's typically good witches won't freeze. In this case, Phoebe is shown that she does freeze, and that is because she has now become evil temporarily. I also really loved, like in this episode, I feel like it's really the fine details, those small things. Like, for example, with the Woogie, it's a shadow, it's in the basement. We don't really get to see it much in the start, but we see its effects on the house and on the people who go into the house. I mean, obviously, first issue we see is the gas smell and the crack in the floor, and then the Woogie is released. We see it possess the gas man. When the gas man goes upstairs to inform the sisters that by the end of the day there will be no more problems and returns down, we can see that his shadow is moving independently of him, showing that he has been possessed. And this is when he is ordered to lure Phoebe. He then calls Phoebe down to the basement, and this is where Phoebe becomes possessed. And the gas man, no longer being needed, is let go and commit evil, which he does by attacking Piper in the kitchen. We see when Piper gets home from getting the groceries, we see that she gets shocked by the door on her way in, showing that the house has started to rebel against them, like evil has taken its foothold. And we also see that Kit, the cat, is hissing and running out of the house as well, showing that it's even hostile to their familiar. We then, as it progresses, we get peeling wallpaper, we get all of the appliance shocking Piper as she's trying to cook. We get the clocks not showing the correct time. We get Prue coming in to complain about how the water, the shower heads are spewing lava water, essentially extremely hot water. And then eventually we show that once the dinner party idea is abandoned and Prue and Piper are leaving the house, when they turn around to try to go back in, Prue ends up getting thrown away from it, showing that she can't get out of the house. And then later, when they come back, Andy has gone into the house, and Piper, as he's leaving, freezes him while he's between the door while the house is letting him out. And that is how they get back in. However, once they're back in, they aren't able to leave again. So it starts with like a lot of subtle hints and signs before, it being like a big barrier and it being known that the house is turned against them. It's also really interesting that there's kind of an evolution with Grams's portrait specifically. So at the start, when we get the aftershock of the earthquake that opens the episode, her portrait ends up tilted. Then once Phoebe is possessed, we see that her portrait turns upside down, but while Phoebe's still fighting it, when Phoebe eventually does fully give in to the Woogie, we see that her portrait then burns away, like her face is burnt out of the portrait. And then at the end of the episode, when they have sealed the Woogie back, again, the portrait is then turned right side up and is restored, the burn healing itself, essentially. So it kind of shows that progression of, you know, not super evil, starting to become evil, completely evil, and then all the way back to being healed. It's in pristine condition. So it kind of, as you go through the episode, marks where you are within that transition from good to evil. So a lot of little details, overall strong concept, subplots connected to the main plot in that they also highlight and show the progression of the main plot. All in all, I can't think of a single flaw in this episode. Not one. And that is so rare. And because it is so rare, this is our first personal 10 out of 10 episode, which brings us to our personal ranking, which is in first place as it's our first 10 out of 10. Is There a Woogie in the House? Which has unseated Dead Man Dating, which has held first place basically since it premiered, and that was one of the earliest episodes. And then third place was The Witch is Back, From Fear to Eternity, Wicked Envy, The Truth is Out There and It Hurts, Something Wicked This Way Comes, Dream Sorcerer, Feats of Clay, Thank You for Not Morphing, Secrets and Guys, I've Got You Under My Skin, The Wendigo, The Wedding from Hell, and in last place, The Fourth Sister. Which now brings us to our final segment where we are going to be comparing each of the seasons against each other in our series ranking so far. As it shows on screen, the total score that's possible, the maximum score that's possible was 220, because there are 22 episodes that each could get a maximum score of 10. And in the case of this episode, both the mostly objective ranking and the personal ranking were 10 out of 10, so that brings the objective up to 102 out of 220, and on the personal side, it is 98 out of 220 so far. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Charmed Season 1, Episode 15, Is There a Woogie in the House? Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.